Brenda's fingers tightened around the wine bottle as she watched the velvet box emerge from Vincenzo Moretti's jacket pocket. She'd been tracking the signals for the past 20 minutes. The locked exit door, the new busboy whose shoes cost more than her rent, the way Vanessa Miller kept glancing at her watch with the precision of someone timing a detonation. The woman's hand had drifted toward her designer clutch 3 times in the last 5 minutes. Brenda knew what waited inside. She'd seen enough discovery documents from her paralegal days to recognize a setup when money, romance, and convenient positioning converged at the same table. Her pulse hammered against her throat. The restaurant hummed with the oblivious chatter of the wealthy. Vincenzo's dark eyes were fixed on Vanessa with the kind of devotion that made men blind. He was about to kneel. Once he dropped to one knee, he'd be defenseless, exactly what they wanted. Brenda had seconds to choose. Let the most feared man in New York die at the hands of his own fiancée, or risk everything by breaking the invisible barrier between server and served. When Vincenzo's hand moved to open the ring box, she stepped forward, the bottle raised as her excuse, and leaned down until her lips nearly brushed his ear. One word. That's all it took to shatter everything. Don't. If you want to discover how this one word, Brenda said, transformed and changed the course of her life, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are watching from. Your support is invaluable to us. Now, let's how Brenda's life has been. 2 jobs and a secret. That's what Brenda Davis juggled to stay afloat in New York while keeping her past buried. By day, she worked the breakfast shift at a diner in Brooklyn, slinging coffee to construction workers and nurses ending their night shifts. Evenings, she donned the black uniform at the Gilded Lily, the kind of restaurant where appetizers cost what she made in tips all week. The rich never looked at servers. They looked through them, around them, past them. Brenda had learned to weaponize that invisibility. It made her good at her job. It also made her dangerous in ways none of them realized. Before the diner and the white tablecloths, she'd been a paralegal at Hoffman & Associates, a corporate firm with titanium ethics and paper-thin morals. She'd filed documents, organized discovery, and eventually seen too much shell companies laundered money, names that appeared in newspapers under words like alleged and syndicate. When she'd asked the wrong question to the wrong partner, she'd been terminated within the hour. No severance, no references, just a warning that some curiosities were fatal. That was 18 months ago. Now she kept her head down, her observations to herself, and her savings account slowly climbing toward an escape plan. Table 12, Brenda, VIP section. Kenneth, the floor manager, appeared at her elbow with a wine list and an expression that meant trouble. Don't mess this up. That's Vincenzo Moretti. The name hit her like cold water. Even people who avoided the news knew that name. The Don of the New York families, 34 years old and more powerful than men who'd been in the game since he was in diapers. The papers called him the gentleman, but everyone knew what happened to people who crossed him. They disappeared into the kind of silence that made investigators stop asking questions. Why me? Her voice came out calmer than her racing heartbeat suggested. His people called ahead. Female server only tonight. No men approached the table. Kenneth pressed the wine list into her hands. He's here with his fiancée. Word is he's proposing. Big romantic gesture. Just smile, pour drinks, and be a ghost. Brenda nodded slowly. She could do ghost. She'd been practicing for over a year. The VIP section glowed like a stage-set crystal catching candlelight, white linens pristine as snow. Vincenzo Moretti commanded the center table, and Brenda understood instantly why men feared him and women couldn't look away. Even seated, he projected absolute authority. His black suit was cut with the precision of someone who understood that presentation was power. Dark hair swept back from a face built from angles, sharp jaw, prominent cheekbones, a mouth that seemed carved from stone. Ink marked his neck, some kind of script that disappeared beneath his collar, but it was his stillness that made her skin prickle. While the restaurant buzzed with conversation and movement, he sat perfectly motionless, dark eyes tracking everything, with the focused patience of something predatory, waiting for the right moment to strike. Champagne to start, she murmured to herself, lifting the bottle from the ice bucket. The woman beside him was breathtaking. Vanessa Miller, blonde and polished like a jewel, diamonds dripped from her throat and wrists. Her hand rested on Vincenzo's forearm with the casual ownership of someone who believed she'd already won. Isn't this perfect? Vanessa's voice carried the bright enthusiasm of performance. I still can't believe you arranged all this just for us. Brenda approached, face arranged in professional neutrality, and that's when she saw it. The first crack in the perfect picture. Vanessa's champagne sat untouched, condensation running down the flute. Her smile was camera-ready, but her eyes kept darting toward the kitchen entrance. Quick glances, timed, like clockwork. And there, by the door that should have been propped open for servers, stood a new security guard Brenda had never seen before. He wore the restaurant's uniform, but his shoes were wrong. Expensive Italian leather, not the standard issue black that the rest of the staff wore. Brenda's paralegal instincts kicked in, the training she couldn't shut off even after she'd lost the job. Detail observation, pattern recognition. Something was off. She poured the champagne with steady hands while her mind raced. Vanessa tapped her fingers on the table, not nervous energy, but deliberate rhythm. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. A signal? The security guard shifted his weight, and Brenda caught the telltale bulge under his jacket. Wrong placement for a standard holster. That was a shoulder rig, and a big one. Her blood turned cold. This wasn't a romantic proposal. This was an execution dressed up in candlelight and champagne. And Vincenzo Moretti, the most dangerous man in New York, had absolutely no idea he was the guest of honor at his own assassination. The Gilded Lily lived up to its name, all gold leaf and crystal chandeliers, the kind of place where silence cost more than noise. Brenda moved through the VIP section like water, invisible and essential. She'd memorized 6 orders without writing anything down, her mind cataloging preferences the way it used to catalog evidence files. Table 8. The blonde with the Cartier bracelet had a fresh bruise on her wrist, poorly covered with foundation. Her husband ordered for her without asking. Table 10. 2 men in identical suits discussing numbers that made one of them sweat through his collar. A deal going south in real time. Brenda saw everything. It was her gift and her curse. The restaurant's energy shifted when Vincenzo Moretti walked through the door. Conversations didn't stop, that would be too obvious, but they quieted, like prey instinctively lowering their voices when a predator entered the territory. The staff moved with mechanical precision, fear disguised as professionalism. But Vincenzo only had eyes for the woman on his arm. Vanessa Miller floated beside him in a cobalt blue dress that cost more than Brenda's annual rent. Diamond earrings caught the light with every turn of her head. She looked like an angel, all golden hair and practiced grace, the perfect accessory for a king. Kenneth seated them at table 12, the best position in the house. Brenda approached with champagne, noting details her paralegal brain couldn't shut off. Vanessa's flute sat untouched, condensation pooling at the base. Her fingers drummed the white tablecloth 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, deliberate, rhythmic. Then Brenda saw him. The new security guard by the exit door, standing too stiff, watching too carefully, no earpiece, wrong shoes, and the telltale bulk under his jacket that every trained eye recognized. Her pulse kicked into overdrive. This wasn't a romantic dinner. This was a stage set for murder. The restaurant held its breath. Conversations faded to whispers, then to nothing. Even the kitchen noise seemed to dim, as if the entire building recognized the significance of the moment about to unfold. Vincenzo cleared his throat, his hand moving toward his inner jacket pocket. The velvet box emerged, deep burgundy, against his black suit. Across the table, Vanessa's smile widened, but her eyes flicked toward the door 1 second, 2 seconds calculating. That's when Brenda saw it. The fake security guard's hand disappeared beneath his jacket, fingers wrapping around something cylindrical. A silencer. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The proposal was the distraction. Once Vincenzo dropped to one knee, he'd be immobilized, vulnerable. A perfect target dressed up in romantic theater. Brenda didn't think. She grabbed the water pitcher and moved, her legs carrying her forward on pure instinct. Her hands stayed steady, even as her heart threatened to explode through her ribs. "Allow me, sir," she murmured, leaning across the table as if to refill his glass. She bent low, close enough to smell his cologne, expensive, understated. Her lips nearly brushed his ear, her voice dropping to a whisper only he could hear. "Don't open the box. 3 men at the door. Kitchen. Exit is clear." Vincenzo went absolutely still. For one terrible second, Brenda thought he wouldn't believe her, that she'd just signed her own death warrant for nothing. Then his head turned slightly, and his dark eyes found Vanessa's face, really looked at her for the first time that evening. Brenda saw it too. The eager anticipation in Vanessa's expression wasn't love or excitement. It was the focused attention of someone waiting for an explosion they'd personally set in motion. Vincenzo's jaw hardened. In one fluid motion, he kicked the table upward. The first gunshot shattered the chandelier overhead. Chaos erupted in crystal and screams. Vincenzo moved with lethal precision, his hand already reaching for the ankle holster hidden beneath his tailored pants. The gun appeared in his grip like it had been waiting there all along. But he didn't run. His free hand shot out and locked around Brenda's wrist like a steel manacle. "You're coming." His voice cut through the noise. "They saw you help me." Another shot cracked through the air. Brenda's head whipped around in time to see Vanessa rising from her chair, the angel in blue transformed into something cold and deadly. A pistol emerged from her designer clutch, aimed directly at Vincenzo's chest. "You were always too trusting, Amore," Vanessa said, her voice stripped of affection. She fired. Vincenzo yanked Brenda sideways, the bullet embedding itself in the wall where his head had been. Brenda saw something flicker across his face, not fear, but something worse. The kind of pain that came from realizing the person you'd loved had been a lie from the beginning. Then the pain crystallized into something glacial and dangerous. "Move," Vincenzo barked. Brenda didn't argue. She spun toward the kitchen, her territory, the maze of stainless steel and heat she navigated every shift. Bullets chased them through the dining room, staff scattered like startled birds. Brenda shouldered through the kitchen doors, Vincenzo right behind her, his gun returning fire to keep the assassins back. "Left! Through the prep station!" she shouted. They vaulted over a cutting board station, dodged a line cook frozen in shock, and burst into the alley. The garbage trucks were making their weekly pickup, their massive bodies blocking the street and the assassins' vehicles. A beat-up Honda sat near the dumpster, keys dangling from the ignition. Some prep cook's ride. "Get in," Vincenzo ordered. They dove inside. The engine roared to life, and they disappeared into the New York night, leaving shattered glass and shattered illusions behind. The apartment in the Bronx looked like it had been forgotten by time-peeling wallpaper, a single bare bulb, furniture that had seen better decades. Vincenzo's old neighborhood, before the tailored suits and penthouse views. A place to disappear. The moment the door slammed shut, he moved. Brenda's back hit the wall, his forearm across her collarbone, not quite choking but close enough. His dark eyes burned with adrenaline and something raw betrayal that needed somewhere to land. "Who are you?" The words came out sharp as broken glass. "How did you know?" Brenda forced herself to meet his gaze, even as her pulse hammered against his arm. "I'm nobody, just a waitress who used to be a paralegal." Paralegals don't spot assassination setups. They do when they worked for Hoffman and Associates. She swallowed hard. "Criminal defense. I filed discovery documents for mob cases, organized evidence for RICO trials. I learned how hits get arranged, the signals, the positioning, the timing. I saw it all over your table tonight." Vincenzo's grip loosened slightly. "Why'd you leave?" "I didn't leave. I got fired for asking questions about shell companies and money trails I wasn't supposed to notice." Her voice steadied. "Turns out being observant is only valuable until you observe the wrong things." He stepped back, processing. That's when Brenda saw the blood seeping through his jacket sleeve, a graze from Vanessa's gun. "You're hit," she said quietly. "It's nothing. It's something if it gets infected. Sit down." She found a first aid kit in the bathroom, of course he'd have one here, and returned to find him stripped to his undershirt, the wound visible, not deep, but angry. Brenda cleaned it with steady hands, the same efficiency she'd used serving wine an hour ago. Vincenzo watched her work, his expression shifting from suspicion to something else. "You saved my life," he said finally. "You saved mine too. They would have killed me." A pause. Then, "We're even." "No." Brenda met his eyes and said, "We're survivors." Dawn filtered through grimy windows, casting long shadows across the safe house. Vincenzo sat at the scarred kitchen table, his phone disassembled in front of him, battery separated, SIM card removed. Too dangerous to use. He couldn't call his crew without knowing who'd betrayed him. They were trapped together in uncertainty. "I remembered something," Brenda said from the couch, where she'd spent the night fully clothed. Right before everything went sideways, Vanessa's phone lit up. The text notification. It was in Cyrillic, Russian. Vincenzo's jaw tightened. "You're sure?" "I notice things. It's what I do." She paused. Does that mean something? It means the last 2 years of my life were a lie. His voice was flat, emotionless in the way of men holding back earthquakes. Every word, every touch, every morning I woke up next to her, it was calculated. She rehearsed it all. Brenda crossed to the table, sat across from him. She didn't offer sympathy. He didn't need coddling. Better a painful truth than a beautiful lie, she said simply. At least now you know what's real. His dark eyes found hers, searching for something. And what's real? He asked. You're alive. I'm alive. That's real. She stood, moved to the ancient refrigerator. And we need to eat if we're going to figure out what comes next. The freezer yielded a frozen pizza, expired but salvageable. They worked in companionable silence. Brenda preheating the oven, Vincenzo finding plates that didn't match. Domestic normalcy in the eye of the storm. You don't break easily, he observed, watching her move with the same efficiency she'd shown in the restaurant, in the escape, in everything. Can't afford to. She slid the pizza into the oven. Breaking is a luxury for people with safety nets. He understood that. More than she knew. For the first time since Vanessa's gun had appeared, Vincenzo felt something other than betrayal. He felt less alone. We need to draw her out. Vincenzo spread a map of the city across the table, marking locations with a pencil. If Vanessa thinks I'm dead or dying, she'll come to confirm the kill. Professionals always do. Brenda leaned over the map, studying his marks. You're going to fake your death? Close enough. Leak word that I'm critically wounded, hiding at a warehouse in Red Hook. He tapped the location. She'll send people to finish what she started, and you'll be waiting. We'll be waiting. He caught her sharp look. You spotted the setup. I need those eyes. Vincenzo stood, walked to a duffel bag in the corner, and pulled out stacks of cash, more money than Brenda had seen in her life. He set it on the table between them. Take it. Disappear. Get on a bus to somewhere. They'll never find you. Brenda stared at the money, then at him. No, this isn't your fight. I'm already in the game, Vincenzo. Her voice was steady, certain. The moment I whispered in your ear, I became a target. Running just means dying alone somewhere else. She pushed the money back toward him. Let's win it instead. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition of a kindred spirit who understood that survival sometimes meant standing your ground. You'll need a new look, he said finally. They saw your face. 20 minutes later, Brenda stood in front of the bathroom mirror with kitchen scissors. Her long hair fell in dark ribbons to the floor. What remained was short, sharp, practical. She barely recognized herself. When she emerged, Vincenzo studied her with the same intensity he'd given the map. You look different, he said. Good. Different keeps me breathing. She met his eyes. What's the plan, partner? Partner, not waitress, not victim, but equals. The shipping yard looked like a graveyard for industrial dreams, rusted containers stacked like tombstones, oil-slicked puddles reflecting the moon. Perfect noir territory for an ending. Brenda crouched in the crane operator's cabin, her heart a war drum in her chest. Below, the office container glowed with a single light. The bait. They'd made it look convincing: blood trails, scattered medical supplies, the illusion of a desperate man's last stand. Headlights cut through the darkness. 3 black SUVs rolled through the yard's entrance, silent as sharks. Vanessa emerged first, still stunning even dressed for murder in tactical black. 3 men flanked her Russian, judging by their build and the Cyrillic tattoos visible on their necks. They moved toward the container with professional efficiency. He's inside, Vanessa's voice carried across the silent yard, bleeding out like the dog he is. Make it quick. They reached the container door. One man kicked it open. Empty. Looking for me? Vincenzo stepped from behind a shipping container, his gun steady. Around the perimeter, shadows materialized his loyalists. The men he'd contacted through the secure line Brenda had remembered from old case files. They'd been waiting. Vanessa spun, her composure cracking. Then she laughed, cold and bitter. You sentimental fool. You actually loved me, didn't you? That was always your weakness, Vincenzo. Her gun rose, aimed at his chest. Brenda didn't hesitate. Her hand slammed the crane controls. The massive hook and chain swung in a violent arc, metal screaming. Vanessa's head whipped toward the sound. 1 second of distraction. 1 second was all Vincenzo needed. He closed the distance, struck her wrist. The gun clattered across concrete. In moments, his men had the Russians surrounded, outgunned, finished. Vincenzo stood over Vanessa, his expression carved from ice. "You're right. Love was my weakness." He glanced up at Brenda in the crane. "Not anymore." Vanessa lunged for the fallen gun. Vincenzo's foot came down on her wrist, not hard enough to break, but enough to stop her. His men closed in, zip ties and efficiency. The Russians were already on their knees, hands behind their heads. "The Bratva will come for you," Vanessa spat, venom replacing the honeyed voice he'd once loved. "Let them try." Vincenzo's tone was arctic. "You made one mistake, you underestimated the Waitress." He nodded to his men. They hauled Vanessa and her handlers toward waiting vehicles. Whatever happened next would happen far from here, in the kind of darkness the law never reached. Distant sirens wailed police, always late to the party. Vincenzo's crew melted into the shadows like smoke, leaving only him and Brenda standing amidst scattered shell casings and the wreckage of his old life. The adrenaline drained away, leaving something rawer behind. He looked at her, really looked, this woman who'd whispered one word and changed everything. "You can go back now," he said quietly. "Your life, your apartment, your shifts at the diner. I'll set you up with enough money that you'll never have to serve anyone again." Brenda climbed down from the crane, her new short hair catching the moonlight. She crossed the distance between them until she stood close enough to see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of betrayal he'd carry forever. "My life was serving people who didn't see me," she said. "Invisible, interchangeable, forgotten the moment I left the room." She held his gaze. "You see me, Vincenzo. Maybe that's worth more than safety." His hand rose slowly, hesitant in a way his gun hand never was, and touched her cheek. "Maybe you're the only real thing I have left. Then let's build something real." 6 months later, the Gilded Lily stood empty, chandeliers glowing over vacant tables. Vincenzo had bought the place 3 months ago, not for the investment, but for the symbolism, the location where everything had shattered and rebuilt itself into something stronger. He sat at table 12, the same seat where Vanessa had smiled and plotted his death. The ghost of that night lingered in the crystal and candlelight, but ghosts didn't frighten him anymore. He'd learned to live with them. The front door opened. Brenda stepped through, and his breath caught the way it had every day for 6 months. She wore emerald silk that moved like water, her short hair elegant now instead of desperate, diamonds at her throat, his diamonds, given freely, not worn as costume jewelry for murder. She wasn't invisible anymore. She commanded the room the way she'd commanded his attention since the moment she'd whispered that single, life-saving word. Brenda crossed to the table and sat across from him, a smile playing at her lips. "You rented out the whole restaurant?" "Dramatic. I learned from the best." He reached into his jacket, the same pocket, the same motion that had almost killed him once. The burgundy velvet box emerged, worn at the edges. He'd carried it for 6 months, waiting for the right moment. Vincenzo slid it across the white tablecloth. "No traps this time, Brenda. No hidden guns, no betrayals, no lies." His dark eyes held hers with an intensity that had nothing to do with danger and everything to do with truth. "Just a question." Brenda's fingers traced the velvet box. She opened it slowly. The diamond caught the light, throwing rainbows across her face. When she looked up, her smile was radiant, genuine in a way Vanessa's never had been. "Ask me," she said, and he did. "So family, I want to hear your thoughts." Vincenzo offered Brenda a bag full of cash to disappear and live safely, but she refused it to stay and fight by his side. Let me know in the comments. Would you have taken the money and ran, or stayed for the fight? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Also, before you go, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what's the weather like over there? I love seeing our global community come together. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.